You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Happy Thursday to everyone out there. All right, Thursday, NFL draft starts today, so you're probably thinking, all right, well, you know what? Are any U of A guys going to be picked? Probably the only one that could be picked is Stanley Berryhill III. Stan, as many of you know, was an all-conference special teams player, the best player on Arizona last year by a mile. It'll be an uphill battle, but he definitely has the potential to possibly play in the NFL, mainly because he can do whatever you want. He can return kicks. He can receive. He's a coach's dream. It's not going to cause any problems. So Stan Berryhill III is a guy, and we will certainly keep you up to date on how Stan does. But let's talk a little bit of the best NFL players in U of A history. Number one, Rob Gronkowski. Now, Gronkowski didn't leave a huge mark here at the U of A, mainly because he was injured, played basically a full season, then about a half of a season, and then he missed his junior year with a back injury. Clears for the NFL draft, and the rest is history. You're talking about maybe the greatest tight end in NFL history. Certainly a guy that at his apex is the best tight end. Synonymous with Tom Brady, holds a lot of records with them together. But Gronk was really the ultimate mismatch in that he didn't really have any flaws. He was a great blocker. He engaged in blocking, pardon the pun, and he was a great pass receiver. So you look at it, there wasn't really anything. He wasn't a glorified wide receiver that they bulked up. He was a guy that was able to play that position. And you know, when Gronk was here, you knew that he was really good, but you also didn't know to the level of which he was going to be. And I think that was certainly something that became apparent very early on, that this was going to be an NFL mismatch. I think what's also impressive about him is that he was able to essentially battle back from about 3 different injuries. You had your elbow, you had your knee, you had your back. And you know what? I think you're looking at the best tight end in history. Again, he's been a little bit injury prone, but certainly a guy that you could put in that discussion. All right, number 2. He doesn't have the championships, but Lance Briggs, I think, is very difficult to make the case that it's not the second best player in U of A NFL history. And it's actually pretty straightforward as to why. He's made 7 Pro Bowls. He's been multiple all-pro defense. There really isn't anything else that you can say there because nobody else really has those qualifications. A couple guys down the list have some of them. They don't have all of them. And Briggs was a guy, too, that you could tell was going to be a really, really good pro. I always thought it was odd that he slipped on draft day in the manner in which he did, mainly because he was big, he was athletic. He came in here as a running back, and he left here as one of the best players in U of A history. Lance Briggs probably should have been more of about a top 15 pick as opposed to falling into that second, third round category because there really wasn't anything not to like about Briggs and what he was able to bring to the equation. He was kind of at the forefront of your new age linebacker, for lack of a better term, and that he was big, he was physical, and he could cover it in space. Lance Briggs was certainly a guy that you would look at and say, you know, he would have been a great player at absolutely any school that he would have gone to. He was that type of guy. All right. Now, one thing that we do need to talk about, a little bit of house cleaning right here. Let's talk about BetOnline Sportsbook. All right. BetOnline is where you want to be right now, mainly because you can hop on and you've got the best props, you've got the best betting lines, and it's easy to navigate. People all around are using it. And you know what? If it's good enough for everybody else, it should be good enough. It's good enough for me. Hopefully it's good enough for you. Check out BetOnline Sportsbook. Let's take a quick break. Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. We're going down our list of the best NFL players in U of A history. Coming in at number 3 is Tedy Bruschi. Now, A lot of people are saying, well, why isn't Brewski number 2? Or, Brewski's got all the rings. Well, to me, it's a little bit different. I'm not a rings as an end-all, be-all type guy. I believe that at some point, it also comes into what kind of player you are. And Tedy Bruschi certainly was no slouch in that regard. And, you look at it, made a Pro Bowl, was part of that initial New England dynasty, really kind of a quarterback on the field on the opposite side, and a player that I think is difficult to look at and say was anything but a winner. And he was able to transition. He went from being an from a pass rusher at the U of A defensive end to playing linebacker in the NFL. And that's certainly no small task right there. That's something that a lot of people can't do. And Tedy Bruschi was able to do it. You always got the sense with Tedy Bruschi that he was going to be a coach at some point. That never really materialized. But I don't think that anybody is surprised in the least to see him have the kind of to see him with the kind of impact that he has in the announcing scene, as far as still being around Arizona football, being a big proponent of Jedd Fisch. There's a lot to like about Tedy Bruschi. And I think, first and foremost, he's one of the best Wildcats of all time. Left the NCAA as the all-time sack leader, which is certainly something that I think is very hard to minimize, especially in a day and age where, it was a team defense for sure. Rob Waldrop kept a lot of people off of Brewski, but Brewski also had to finish those himself. And when you're looking at names like Derek Thomas, you're looking at names like Tedy Bruschi, you're in some pretty good company right there. So Brewski, I don't think anybody was surprised that he was able to latch on in the NFL because he was always such an instinctive player. I think the surprise was that he was able to play in the manner in which he did and become a really impactful player, and not just kind of a besides the play type guy that's always in on the play. He was part of the play, and I think that's what surprised some people. Okay. Now, let's talk about the NFL draft coming up right here. This is the place to be. You're going to have all the coverage all over all the networks. Keep it locked right here. And thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we're talking about the greatest NFL players in U of A history so far. Number 1, Rob Gronkowski. Number 2, Lance Briggs. Number 3, Tedy Bruschi. All right, number 4, we're going with the guy that I don't think anybody would have thought at the time would have been this. We're going with Glenn Parker. All right, Glenn holds a very, very unique distinction, or held a very unique distinction, in that he was one of only a few guys to ever start 5 Super Bowls. And you look at it, he was good friends with my buddy Kevin Woodman growing up. He went off junior college, then goes to the U of A, becomes a little bit of a, how do I put this? He goes in there as a little bit of a project, but he's incredibly long. He's very strong, and he was able to make it. And when he got to the pros, his athleticism, his length certainly helped him out in a big way there, because he was able to stick, and he was able to stick there for a long time, especially being one of the anchors of that Buffalo Bills offensive line. That was one of the best offenses in all of NFL history, even though they didn't win the championship. I get that. But again, you start in 5 Super Bowls, you're doing something right. Glenn's always been really good to me as well. So certainly a guy that is worthy of some platitudes right there. And I think he was kind of the ultimate Tomy guy, in that he was able to come in. And you know what? Wasn't this most highly rated guy. Again, junior college, started football really late. But Dick Tomy, as he did with so many other players, saw something in him. He saw a guy that he could really turn into a next level football player. And that's exactly what he did. Glenn Parker, you look at him now, and he's svelte and everything, but you could tell that he had some talent, but he was your ultimate Dick Tomy player, in that he had the kind of talent that you really needed to be able to get to the league. Not a lot of people saw it. Dick Tomy saw it, and that's why Dick Tomy is so good at what he did, and that's why he's revered by so many players, and that he was able to see guys like Glenn Parker and say, all right, I can put him in this type of spot, and he can produce. All right, so that's your first 4 right there. We're going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to break down the second 4. Again, it's a pretty good list of U of A guys. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats.